Mario on screen and walking us through diversity.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now? Hey guys, well I'm assuming you can hear me. Hopefully you can. Name's Mario Tavone, live in Melbourne, Australia. I never finished high school, never went to university, so I don't have any qualifications or degrees or any corporate experience at all. I've spent my life studying behavioural science, private investigating, body language, public speaking, and all kinds of forms of communication. It's been my passion for life. Now, the diversity, what I want to talk about today with diversity is mainly what I've seen in the workplaces that I've worked at, where I've coached managers and executives on their communication and leadership skills. And what I've noticed is that it doesn't matter where you work, doesn't matter the environment, it doesn't even have to be a job. It can be a sport, a club at school, a dance club, the people at the gym, anywhere there's a group of human beings that get together. Diversity always becomes a challenge as the group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And people get into their little groups. So if you could imagine when you were back at high school or primary school, there was always the smart kids, the sport kids, the bullies, the quiets, the nerds. People break into their groups and stick with what they're comfortable with. Because we as human beings, we're all looking to fit in. Now the challenge as a manager in HR or a business owner is that it's your responsibility to manage the diversity, manage the group, the environment. If you leave it to the people, they'll always tend to go into their little groups. And it doesn't mean they don't like each other or don't get along, but having groups that congregate every break, work together, doesn't allow them to get to know other groups, which doesn't take your team to the next level. To have a very successful team, everyone has got to be synergy. Everyone's got to be comfortable to work with each other, support each other. Doesn't matter what race, what religion, what sex you are, what habits you are, what kind of personality. If you feel comfortable in that environment to be yourself, that's when you're going to get the best out of people. So I've made a few notes just from some past experience and what I've learnt from my managers and executives that I've coached over the years. The inclusivity is the main thing. That's the key. Making sure everyone feels included. So if you're a manager, a business owner, a leader of people in any way, then it's your responsibility, your role, to look for the ones that aren't feeling included. There may be 1, 2, 3 people that may feel outside, uncomfortable in that group. And body language is one of the best techniques, one of the best tools to use to learn this, to see this. Because I don't need to talk to people to know they don't feel included. The body language says it all. 93% of what we do, 93% of what we communicate is non-verbal. The best actors, the best comedians know this, and that's why they're so successful, because it's not so much the words they use, it's everything else. The mannerisms, the facial expressions, the body language, the heart rate, everything, the posture, that is what the other person feels. So if you look at your group and you see somebody that the body language is showing you that they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel included, they feel nervous, scared. For example, a pregnant woman in an environment that's dominated by men. I had a client recently that's a lawyer, and I'd say 95% of everyone works there are men. There's a few women there, but majority are men. And one of the women was pregnant. One of the lawyers, the female lawyer, she was about 7, 8 months. So coming towards the end of her pregnancy. But she didn't have the facility then to be taken care of in the environment. So she felt very unincluded. She was felt very outside the square. Prior to being pregnant, she didn't feel that. She felt like the whole team. But because she's pregnant now and she had certain needs, the office didn't have those facilities. The guys there that didn't know how to deal with a pregnant woman that they worked with, they all felt nervous. But she felt quite outside the square. So something as simple as that. You don't have to go out of your way to make somebody feel outside, not included. So if you want to create diversity in the group of human beings, doesn't matter what it is, so we're talking about the corporate world right now, HR, management and so on, you need to look at each individual, look at the groups, pay attention to what's going on, and do whatever you can to make those people feel included. Another example is somebody that may be of a different language. So if you have an environment that you all speak a particular language. For me in Australia, we all speak English. But if I had somebody in my workplace that was Indian, Spanish, Chinese, Maltese, and English was their second language, and it was very hard for them to speak English. They were much more comfortable speaking their language. And there was another person at the place that had the same language. And these two people seemed to feel very uncomfortable to speak their native language together. Then you need to go out of your way to help them feel comfortable, feel included. And there's a lot of techniques you can use to do that. So the point here is just look, pay attention, notice the individual. Body language will tell you a lot that feels outside the square. Now, I've come up with 8 different ways that you can improve your diversity in a workplace. So the first thing is to measure it. Doesn't matter what we do, measuring helps us keep track. So maybe once a week, once a month, get the group together, get the people together, have a meeting, let people share their fears, their concerns, their challenges, and successes. Always look for the successes, of course. There will be a lot of successes. But do that on a regular basis, however you want to do that, once a day, once a week, once a month. But measure it. Keep track of it. Now, remember, diversity is not just about race. There's many obvious things. There's sex, there's religion, there's beliefs, but it can be also personalities. I'm a very outspoken person. I'm a hands-on. I'm very colourful compared to a lot of people that are around me, and I scare the quiet people. If there's people that are introverts, they usually feel a bit afraid around me. But because I'm a body language expert, I can see that, I sense it, and I'll go out of my way to connect with them. So I'll lower my body language and my energy to suit theirs a little bit and bring theirs up and build that little connection. I'll put some effort into building a connection with that person. Because the personality differences is one of the biggest causes of diversity, of lack of diversity. Because it's not obvious. Somebody's loud, somebody's quiet. Most of the people are energetic, body focused, teamwork, go, go, go. And then you get somebody that comes in that's a very quiet kind of person, insecure, and they feel very uncomfortable. They just don't know how to fit in. And if somebody from the group doesn't take time to help them blend in, then they're always going to feel outside the square. Now, recruit over a more diverse area. So if you are in recruitment, focus on bringing people in that are more diverse as well. Look for the different religions. Look for the different personalities. Look for the different beliefs. Bring something different into the group. It'll help the group as long as you can help them fit in. Pay attention to the culture. So look for the groups in your team. If you've got 50 people in your company, look for the little groups and manage them. Try and get them more involved with each other. Look for the minorities, the ones that are feeling excluded from the groups. There might be big groups, yet there might be two people just sit together all the time, smoking out the back or in the tea room, and they just don't mingle, they don't network. Put some effort in, get them involved, and look for their personalities. Pay attention, do some study around personality types. If you're in HR, if you're in management, and I've had this over the last 10 years, I've seen it. It blows my mind how many people are leaders but don't put any effort into behavioural science. Just because you've been promoted to a manager because you did a good job doesn't mean you know how to manage people. Once you have people to manage, you have to learn behavioural science, psychology, leadership. All these things are invaluable. Body language, NLP, neurolinguistics, which is NLP. Anything that will help you be a better leader, a better people manager, that's where the success is, not just the job that you're doing.
Thanks, Mario. Thanks for all of those helpful tips. We'd like to give an opportunity to Aisha, and we will certainly come back to you for more questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Audrey and Ajit, for inviting me for this conversation on diversity and inclusion. It's my pleasure to be here and then talk to you, share some of my own experiences and learn with you today. I'll just begin by picking up on, Mario's point regarding this pressure to fit in, right? And I think in some way or the other, in some moments of our lives and career and social settings, we've all felt that pressure. I certainly became conscious of diversity in the workforce and in people management when I went to the UK. So as Audrey shared with you earlier in the introductions, I'm from Pakistan. I'm actually, my father's Sri Lankan, my mother's Pakistani. I've been brought up in Pakistan, but for the most part, culturally, I consider myself Pakistani, born and brought up here in what is a Muslim majority context. Now, at the age of 23, I went to London and started working in British organizations there, where there was a lot of conversation on race, on color. I mean, before I left my society, I never thought of my color. What is my color? I'm just I think for me, the most, when I used to think about diversity, at most I used to think of gender, male and female, and that was it, not even the full spectrum of gender, even, I have to be honest on that. And then when I go to the UK, I started thinking about my own profile, because suddenly it hit home, right? And then there were very simple things on which it hit home, and it was not to do with any sense of discrimination, but just a sense of loss of what I had in Pakistan versus what I was getting in the UK in the workplace. So I remember the first time I became conscious of it when Eid happened, right? So we have Eid twice a year, and we had Christmas and Easter, and I didn't get any holiday for Eid. And I remember thinking, can I ask my boss, or can I go to HR and say, can I trade in Christmas or Easter for Eid? But, I had that conversation in my head, but never even had the confidence to share that with my immediate manager or my coworker. I just kept it in my head all these years, and I was, because I just didn't have that confidence to even ask. I'm sure they would have never said no. They were very nice people, very gentle, and probably would have spurred a lot of positive action over there. So I think my first consciousness about it was on something so simple. And the first lesson I learned in that was I wish I'd spoken up about it. It was not discrimination. It was just something I could have asked and gotten, right? So I think for me it became very obvious then on small things that I didn't know what it's like to be sensitive to minority issues or issues of inclusion and exclusion until I experienced some form of exclusion myself, however mild and unintentional it may have been. Um, I think Mario also spoke a lot about policy and metrics and measuring the changes we want to see in the workplace. And I would also very much endorse that. I think if you measure what you get at the end of the day, and as HR professional, it's so important to have the right policy frameworks and measure progress against them. And then the third thing is culture, right? So culture, well, as leaders, how do you put in place and regularly role model your own conduct, make those safe spaces where people feel comfortable to talk openly, to really discuss what's on their mind. Because when we talk about diversity, it's not just a nice to have. It's not just a nice drawing room conversation that, oh, it's a tick in the box, or because maybe the government policy is asking us to hire more disabled people or more religious minorities, we've got to do it and have our numbers look good and report it in our annual reports a year. It's there is a business case for diversity, right? What does it bring? For me, the most important thing it brings is diversity of thought. If we have a mix of talents, a mix of backgrounds in the organization, and we've got multiple identities in the organization, we'll have better outputs and we'll have better decision quality. And those two things drive organizational performance. And that really is the bottom line. It's not about doing a favor to anyone. And for me, it's even beyond the basic intrinsic right. Of course, we're all agreed on that, but really it is about driving the business bottom line that for which it is so important. I'll share a little bit about some experience I had in coming back to Pakistan after 12 years of working abroad. So here in Pakistan, as I said, it's a Muslim majority context. We've got a population of over 217 million people, and about 96% of our population is Muslim. So official statistics are just 4% religious minorities, and in that you've got Hindus, Christians, Buddhists. And that sort of percentage is shrinking every year. We're internationally, we're not really known for our respect for minority rights. Nevertheless, there have been lots of positive affirmative action steps to drive equity in the workplace. So, for example, in Pakistan, there's a law which obliges all government organizations and all organizations reporting into the government to have a 2% quota for hiring people with disabilities. We also have just this year passed a law for the protection of people with disabilities in our federal capital area of Islamabad. And that is going to see hopefully a lot of good changes from an employment point of view. And it covers very important areas like removing barriers to access for people with disabilities in public spaces, in access to transportation, public transportation in particular, entertainment areas. Just being able to go to the cinema, for example, is very difficult. So the right to entertainment and the right to healthcare, education facilities is also protected and guaranteed under that, as is the right to free primary to higher education, which for a country like ours is very important. I know for a Sri Lankan audience, you guys are way ahead than us in literacy rates, but for where we are, it's giving that right to education is very important here. We've also got a Transgender Protection bill that was passed in 2018, which allows people to choose their gender, not based on biological traits, but you can self-select your gender and have it officially recognized in your citizenship documents. And then with that also comes government has given quotas in government service in the bureaucracy of Pakistan in provinces as well as the federal government to hire a certain number of transgendered people. And that was a very, very positive step forward because in our society here, the transgendered people were traditionally accepted, but their access to employment remained confined to low income trades, right? So they were mostly involved in theater, dance groups, and so on, but faced a lot of barriers when it came to them getting access in white collar jobs, for example, right? So this today it's really important when we go to government offices. We see often transgendered officials serving us, working with us, just like any other public official. So we're very happy to see that change, and for me that's a very important way that a policy tool can drive change and overcome that resistance. I think that for me that affirmative action was really important to see. So then we also have religious minorities quota, which obliges, again, government departments to offer at least 5% of their seats to religious minorities, which is probably the one that in which we are lagging the most behind. So we've got all these nice policies. To what extent are they being implemented in private organizations or non-government organizations is a different question, but at least the legal framework that we have obliges companies to think about it and then to report against it. And I think when we face a situation where change doesn't necessarily come spontaneously, or where there's a lot of resistance, and there's a lot of resistance to change the status quo, affirmative action policies like these can really help to force that change and get people used to it. The religious minority policy particularly helped me in my role a couple of years ago, where I was leading an organization. And we were recruiting for an administration manager, and we found, based on a very competitive process, a Christian candidate, very experienced, top of the line, but it was the immediate question from my fellow recruitment panelists was, "Oh, will he fit in, Aisha?" And I looked at them and said, "I don't know. Do you think you'll accept him?" So I feel like and at that time we really had to do a lot of work in changing our own mindsets of creating openness for the team to accept his leadership, for the team to be able to take his supervision, his instructions, and work with him, sit with him at meal times. I mean, the stigma of seeing a Christian person holding a managerial position in Pakistan is enormous. And the stigma is so much because in that office till this moment, the Christian staff were confined to having jobs such as office attendance, serving tea, and so on. Nothing beyond that. So for the first time, just having visually a different type of staff and from that background sitting with us, making decisions, really shook things up. And it took a couple of months to get people adjusted to it, but they did, and they saw his performance, and today he's flourishing. And I think that's important as leaders for us to be able to take those bold steps, even when you're facing resistance. I'm conscious of time, and so I'm going to pause over there, Audrey, and we can continue. I just want to hand it over to the next panelist. Thank you.
Thanks, Ayesha. Over to Ashika.
Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Ajit, for inviting me to be on the panel. And I think I must also congratulate you for really initiating this conversation in Sri Lanka. I know there are many who have started the conversation, but I think we do need a very serious discussion and a framework for action. And I think what you have initiated, let me start by saying, is very timely for this country. And let me also share with you some experiences that we've had as an organization, and as myself, who's been an advocate of diversity and inclusion for a very long time. I don't really call myself an expert, but I can share with you my experience. And I think I would really endorse what both Ayesha and Mario had said. Inclusion and diversity isn't just about doing the right thing. I think it does make a lot of business sense. For me, inclusion is about really getting the right team in place to deliver the objectives that you're planning to deliver. Let me explain what I mean. Now, we are an organization that works with women all across the country. we support them with with their income, we support them with political participation, for example. Now, if we don't have women working for us, I think we miss out. We don't uniquely understand the experiences that women that we work with, our clientele, if you want to call them that. We don't fully understand their perspectives. We don't understand their challenges. We don't understand their fears. So in having people, women from the different parts of the country that where we work in, who's in our team, really does make a difference. Because if you only have people who have one type of experience, let's say you're from Colombo, you're highly educated, you speak English, and you only have them plan for programs that are going to be implemented with women who are in various parts of this country, you're not going to get it right. So for me, having that unique experience of people in the way that you plan, in the way that you really decide on what you're going to deliver is a very important thing. So as Ayesha said, there is a very strong business case for having an inclusive team in working for you. Now, this is not as easy as it is said. It's not very easy. Even if you are, as an organization, very committed to ensuring that you're inclusive, that you are actually creating that enabling environment, you are creating a culture where everybody feels appreciated, everybody feels heard, this is not an easy thing to do. So we think the framework of action that we have tried to adopt has three elements to it, and these also speak to everything that Mario, as Aisha also said. But the first thing, what we need to understand is we need to ensure that we are recruiting the right people from very diverse backgrounds. And Sri Lanka is an extremely diverse country, not necessarily only in terms of religion and ethnicity, but also the class, the culture, the caste, where you come from, what school you went to. I mean, these things are very important. So when we are recruiting, we need to be very aware of your own bias as well. If I have been to a school in Colombo, if I speak a certain type of English, I also tend to recruit those that are same to me, because you're very comfortable with them. You can work with them. So it's harder for you to really hear and listen to what the others are saying, what are diverse people saying to you. So first you need to get over your own bias in the recruitment. And when you do recruit, you need to ensure that they are empowered to really speak out and feel comfortable in that meeting. So as Ayesha said, we need to really make sure, and as also Mario said, that we don't have people who are silent. How do we create that environment? But also, how do we really empower them? Give them the right kind of skills, give them the right communication skills, give them the negotiation skills in order for them to thrive in that work environment. So we have called this agency. It's like really building the agency of the people that you recruit. Now, secondly, building the agency is not enough if you're not necessarily putting in place the systems and structures that are required for you to ensure that they can thrive. So these could mean, to give you an example, a flexi work policy. So we have a lot of women working for us, but we also know that they have a role in being a mother, in being a daughter, in being a sister, in being a neighbor, in being so many things, because we have multiple identities. We are not just one single identity. I'm just not the CEO of Chrysalis. I have multiple identities. So we need to appreciate the fact that everything that people do is also very, very important. So a thing like flexi hours, we have found in our organization, really enables not only women, but also men to really engage in their child's life, for example. So many men in our organization say to us, thank you so much for allowing me to attend my daughter's sports meet or attend my daughter's prize giving, because for them, this is something very surprising because they haven't experienced that in other organizations. So when we talk about diversity, we are also appreciating the agencies and the different identities that people have. And we have a policy framework that enables men, women, and anyone else to really play that different identities that they all have. The third thing I think with Ayesha is also talking about is the importance of culture. it's also important that as leaders, as the CEO and as the senior management, we really demonstrate that we also uphold these values and systems, because this is really about a value system in an organization. So if you are the CEO, if you're a senior manager, and if you are not upholding these values, you are not really appreciating the diversity, you're using every opportunity to demonstrate that you are believing in this and you're supporting these policies, then you're not creating a culture that is conducive for inclusive management. And as an organization, you need to realize that this is going to take effort, and this is going to take some resources, because we invest, for example, in really training our teams, in helping them understand what does this really mean. How do I really overcome my own bias? I mean, in Sri Lanka, as you know, we've had 30 years of conflict because of these differences. So now our staff also walk into organization with these different biases about a certain religion, about a certain ethnicity. So we need to recognize that and enable staff also to recognize their own bias, and then ensure that we do not also tolerate certain behaviors and attitudes and values in order to set that standard. While setting the standard, we also need to enable. So let me stop there, because I'm conscious of the time as well, but I will be very happy to answer any questions about some of the things that we have done very practically to ensure that we have a very inclusive organization. Thank you, Audrey.
Thanks, Ashika. And I will put you over to Ajit, who has some questions coming in, but we will get back to everyone also with some questions that we have ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Audrey. We have a couple of questions from our audience. First of all, I would like to ask a question to anyone. I'm presenting it to anyone to answer, or maybe all three of you to answer, but please be brief. In your speeches, you mentioned that you have to accept the diverse cultures and so on. But in the meantime, there may be another school of thought that some organizations would be better off if they have similar kind of people. For instance, a certain ethnic group or a certain religious group and so on. How would you answer that question? Is it good for an organization to have a diversified culture in the organization to thrive? Over to you, anyone.
Yeah. Shall I start?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, if I don't think there's any fully conclusive research on this, to what extent an organization culture needs to be homogeneous versus heterogeneous. But there is some data that does show that depending on your business, when you're living in a multicultural society, where you're giving, even in a society, you've got a mix of people, and depends on who you're serving, whether you're doing running a welfare organization, have to serve multiple sections of your society. You need similar profiles that mirror those people that you are serving, so that they feel comfortable to be your clients. And then also, if you are a for-profit company selling products, you've got to be able to understand your market and the way your customers are going to be thinking, and you can only do that when you've got those kinds of mindsets and backgrounds in your own organizations. So for me, and I have noticed, when we're working in multicultural environments where you've got diverse teams, it really creates a very different type of energy and buzz in the team. You've got so many divergent viewpoints in the team, and that really drives creativity, new ideas. There's healthy conflict, right? I think when we are I often find, and I do have these conversations a lot in my office when we're faced with, oh, will so and so fit in the team or not? You know, it doesn't really fit in our organization culture. Well, what does that mean, right? I mean, so I think the more porous an organizational culture is, the more creativity it generates. And definitely, I think when we are a bit fearful of diversity, or think, okay, a homogenous, you know, like-minded people team would be better, it usually tends to mean less conflict. And for me, there's you know, absence of conflict doesn't mean healthy working relationships. It often means stifled thought, less you know, creativity. I think there's a place for healthy conflict and resolving conflict to come up with better decisions, better outputs, better ideas. That's where I would stand. I think it really generates innovation and creativity.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ashika, I think.
Just to add, I mean, I agree. I agree with Ayesha that it is easy if you have people who are like you working with you, but I think it's at a cost, because what we found in our organization and what I've worked before, I think if you don't have those diverse perspectives, I think the final product of what you're trying to deliver as a company, as an organization, is not as it should be, because you must reflect the diversity that is in your context, in the context that you work in. So if you're not able to really fully capture that diversity, I feel, and it's our experience, that what you deliver ultimately is not also fully captivating the diversity and what your market or what your clientele may need, because we don't have a homogeneous clientele that we're working with. So we need to kind of understand that value add that you bring from having diverse people cannot be underestimated, is what I feel.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's lovely. And anyone else would like to answer? Mario, would you like to chip in with how you feel like having a... Yes.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. The way I see it, the people that asking these kind of questions would have to be in the leadership kind of roles, because if you're in management, you want the people to work together. So it's easier. Yes, I agree. It's easier if you have the same kind of people, because then there's less diversity, there's less challenge, there's less everything. Yes, it's easier, but it's limited. It's going to limit the growth, the creativity, the ability, the success that the team can have when you have everybody the same. A quick example is, in my younger days, I worked in the engineering field, and I worked with men. There was one woman in a factory of 250 men. So you can imagine, we behaved like gorillas. We weren't very, the gentleman did not exist when you've got 250 men, no women around, and it gets quite colourful. But when the one woman, the receptionist, would actually walk out to the factory floor, we all changed. We all learned to behave. When a gentleman come out, we behaved more because there's a woman in the room. And then when I left engineering and I went into hospitality, I worked around a lot of women, a lot of young people, older people, and you have to adapt. And it's much harder to have multiple different people of different races, beliefs, understandings, personalities, and so on. Yes, it's much harder. It's easier to just have everyone the same. But when everyone's different, it rocks the boat. And when the boat's rocking, there's a lot of things happening, and things can be good. And if you're a good manager, if you're a good people person, you're a good leader of other human beings, then you'll be okay. You'll create that diversity. You'll create that team, and people will love it and build off it. I've seen companies do much more with multi-personalities, multi-different people, than the ones that have the same kind of people 20 years ago, and today they still have them, and they're very limited to where they can go. So my answer is yes, it is easier, But no, it's going to limit you in the future. You need that diversity if you want to really be successful.
Okay.
I think it also adds transparency, because when you have people from similar backgrounds, similar tribes, for example, in the Middle East and Pakistani context in certain provinces where societies tend to get very tribal in some places, there's a risk of collusion, financial collusion, all kinds of collusions of vested interest. But when you break things up and have a mix of teams, you lower that risk. So I've certainly been in situations where we've done that deliberately and seen better financial transparency as well.
Well, here in Melbourne, Australia, before COVID hit, there's a big push in government in Victoria to minimise the cultural dominance in suburbs. So we have a lot of suburbs that are dominated by the Vietnamese, Indian, Maltese, Greek. They all congregate, they buy all the shops, and that whole suburb becomes one culture. And it causes a lot of problems, because then other cultures are afraid to live there. They feel outside. The government can't mix it. You can't have 10 Chinese restaurants in one street. You don't get that diversity. So now the government is starting to limit how many kinds of restaurants and shops of a certain culture can be in a certain area. So if the government's doing it in society, it's a good idea to do it in employment, in the workplace as well. Because it does create a lot of problems when you just got one culture that dominate the whole suburb. Easy for them, they get along, but nobody else can come in.
All right. Thank you very much. We have a couple of more questions coming from our audience. Okay, so let me bundle those questions together and ask one question. In business organizations, we are always challenged for results. Results are in the bottom line. It is unlike in the NGO sector or public sector where service or some other bottom line is the determinant factor. So when it comes to profit, which is a determinant of the effectiveness and efficiency of an organization, organizations tend to use proven methodologies, proven tools. So do we have something like a tool or a measure or a matrix where we can use to show that the diversity, equity, inclusion agenda inside an organization, if implemented properly, can really benefit that organization in the long run and also in the short run?
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
That's the easiest answer for me to look at, because the most dominant companies on the planet, Virgin Australia, Google, Apple, have a look at them. Why are they the best? That's the easiest answer. Look at these massive companies that dominate the world in their industry. They are at the peak. They have diversity to the max. They encourage diversity. They want you to be different. The more different you are, the more they want you in their company. So these companies, these organisations that stick with the proven tools and matrix and processes, that they're running off old information. It may have worked in the 50s, but in 2020 it doesn't work anymore. People are different. We all need a different environment. So to go to work at a company that is operating on a 50-year-old, 70-year-old process doesn't work. Everyone loves working at Google and Apple and Virgin because they're different.
Thanks, Mario, for that. We have another interesting question coming to us. It's on hearing the voice. Mario, you also mentioned about people having the voice, and as leaders, how we need to be in tune to hear people's voices. So even if we have policies and procedures in place, how do we make sure that people's voices are heard? This is one of the questions coming to us from our audience.
Ask questions. It's no more harder. It's nothing more. You don't have to go to university for 20 years to understand this. Ask questions. Pull that individual in your room. Have a conversation. What's going on? What's your challenge? How are you? Be interested in that human being, for God's sake. You don't need to give them a piece of paper and say, follow this agenda. Who cares? Take time. Treat that human being like a human being. Have a conversation. Or if it's in a meeting, allow people to interact. Ask questions. If you're giving a workshop or a meeting and you've got 50 people in the room, don't just give a presentation. All right, this is about you guys. Questions. Who has a challenge? Who wants to do this? Who has an idea? Let the people talk, and you won't have to understand what to do. Just give them what they want, if you can, and everyone will be happy. Just ask questions.
I just add to that, Mario. I think Mario is absolutely spot on. But as an organization, something that you can very practically do is to really create those informal spaces for your team to get together. So it's not always very formal. And then you observe, you kind of understand what's going on. Have your senior managers observe. So what we do is to really create informal space for people to simply interact, as you said, Mario, as human beings, right? And then you understand that when they express a feeling, when they express an idea, that you kind of demonstrate that you take that seriously. And these things don't have to be a checklist or a tool. These are just, how do you ensure that human beings interact with each other, as Mario said, but also create official space for that informal interaction. And then also make sure that you create the opportunity for those who are usually not the loudest, who are usually not the most vocal, to present an idea. But you need to create that very formal opportunity for people to come forward and engage with the organization. Otherwise, those that are quiet, those that are the loudest, will be the ones that take center stage always.
All right, thank you very much. I have a special question to first to Ashika, and probably others also can chip in. Now we are living in a country where education is segregated from ethnic basis to religious basis to class basis and so on and so forth. If we are talking about the DEI agenda for Sri Lanka, shouldn't we also lobby for the government to, go back and change, or maybe go forward and change these the segregations which create the initial problems with regard to diversity and equity and inclusion. That's number one. Because I think a couple of other people also made that sentiment, because unless we set our country right at the very foundational level, once they go up and come to the organization, their already attitudes are formed and systems are already in place for them to not to accept it or not to value it and appreciate the human diversity. We all know that diversity is colorful, diversity brings positive results and so on. But unfortunately, we have been taught to have a different system. And how did Pakistan do all these kinds of things with 271 million people? And that's about, we are talking about 21 million people here in Sri Lanka. And I would like to ask from Salma as Aisha as well. Of course, Australia is very multicultural and so on. I don't think there is such segregation there. Let's put a little thought to this one and establishing some ideas and thoughts. Over to you, Ashika, first.
Thank you. I myself have gone to all girls school of a certain of a certain class, I would say. But I agree with you that in Sri Lanka, this segregation of schools based on religion, based on your gender, has not really helped our diversity conversation. And I think we have suffered as a country because we have failed to truly appreciate that diversity. We have failed to really respect each other because of our religion, because of our ethnicity, because of our class. So I would say a huge starting point would be to really lobby for these non-segregated schools. But even if that is too far to reach, I think what we need to do within schools is to really bring in education about diversity and inclusion, so that children do not grow up thinking that my religion and my ethnicity is superior to somebody else, or my ethnicity and religion is inferior to somebody else. So if we cannot get to the point of not having segregated schools, or maybe what we can do as a first step is to really introduce into the school curriculum these issues about appreciating diversity. Because even if you look at textbooks, if you look at the way that our teachers are being groomed, the teachers are being trained, they themselves walk into the schools with a huge bias, and they cultivate these biases onto the.
Did you mute her?
No, lost.
You want to step in and say?
Yeah. Oh.
Audrey, we can't hear you.
Sorry, Ashika.
Sorry. Many of the. Sorry, can you hear me now?
The last few seconds we lost.
Yeah, just to say that at least to promote this idea of having girls and boys in one school, because a lot of the issues that we are dealing with regards to sexual reproductive health, gender-based violence, are stemming from this not understanding or the lack of socialization that we have for boys and girls about respecting the diversity in gender. So I think the little things we must do, but I would say, Ajit, definitely we should lobby for these changes as collectively, collectively as very different organizations working collectively.
Okay. Anyone else?
If I may, Ajit, I would add to that, like from the Pakistani context, what he does, so Pakistan is a country of contradictions, right? So we've got some very, very progressive laws that have been passed in our country in the last 20 years, when it comes to gender-friendly laws, disability, everything, you name it, in terms of legislation. We're getting quite compliant with what a lot of our UN conventions ratification obligations have been. So there's that sort of very progressive legislative agenda which is driving change. Behind that is a lot of push from progressive parts within government, within this generation of bureaucracy, as well as quite progressive mindsets that we're seeing in the new generations of parliamentarians that have joined political parties in the last 10, 15 years. At the same time, a lot of this push has also come from interest groups such as the Chambers of Commerce, Pakistan Workers Federation, Pakistan Employers Federation. So the left and the labor movement has been really, really pivotal in this, as have been lots of other types of social movement that have really taken these needs, particularly of marginalized, excluded groups, to the forefront, to parliamentarians, and lobby through that chain and sensitize parliamentarians and ministers to change a lot of things. So that's why a lot of change and in policies and regulations have come about. Now that exists side by side with what I would say as a Pakistani is a lot of prejudices and biases that still do exist at a social level. Our education system, I mean, we have about 60 or just barely 60% of our population is literate, and these are people, literacy mean basic math and writing skills. That's it. So vast majority, vast number of our people are still illiterate. We've got a very, very biased, class segregated, I would say, income segregated education system, because your access to education depends entirely on how much income your family has. We've got 120,000 schools in Pakistan. Half of them, 60,000, are public, half of them are private. Even in the private, there are lots of, variations depending on your income level. So it's not as if the existence of policies at a high level has changed biases and the social prejudices that exist. But I still think that legislative and policy level change has spurred positive action for excluded groups when it comes to their right to employment in the workplace. So even though there's still a lot of work to do at the social level, I feel that forcing change at the legislative level has been a very good positive step.
Thanks, Aisha. Thanks for that. And related to that, now when you have, legal policies, or even if you don't have legal policies, when we think about, marginalized groups, or, bringing them in, having that diversified culture, we've seen in certain places, we have affirmative action, right? And, while, it's really easy for HR to sit and write a policy saying, okay, we, our target is to have 50% say women, so we are going to in management. So, this is our goal. So here are some strategies, etc. But it's always, somebody else is losing out, right? And, there is a power struggle. There is a compromise and, change, right? That needs to be managed. Any advice to our, HR folks on how we manage those, challenges, and your experience on, kind of standing up for affirmative action? So, sorry, not positive discrimination. Thanks.
Let me start by, just to say that we are not a large organization. So I'm not sure whether some of these actions would help a very large company or an organization. But when we decided that we want to recruit more women and we want to recruit more people from different ethnicities, we made sure that our hiring process and our recruitment process kind of reached those that needed to be reached. So where we advertise, where we don't advertise, who do we reach out to get as many diverse people to apply to a vacancy that's available in our organization. So we spent a lot of time trying to reach those that we wouldn't normally reach. So not using the newspapers that everybody would use, but actually go to newspapers that would be read by someone who only speaks Tamil, for example, or someone who only speaks Sinhala in this case as well. So recruitment. And then also we made sure that our senior management really understood why we wanted to have a diverse team working for us. And I said for us, it was also because we wanted to we have to have people who are diverse, because our work is about improving diversity. Our work is about improving inclusiveness. So we make sure that our senior managers are constantly told that this is our intention and this is why we need to recruit people. And also in the way that we have set up our interview panel, the way that we set up our interview guidelines, our interview questions, we always have a question about what people feel about diversity and gender equality, for example. And when we do recruit, Audrey, we do understand that there is positive discrimination. But one thing that we also very careful of is that we are not also just hiring a woman just because she's a woman, right? We want to be able to hire women who are talented, who are skilled. And as a woman, I wouldn't want to be hired just simply because I'm a woman. I want to be hired because I'm a professional woman. That is the reason that I want to be hired. So we are not simply saying we want to hire a Tamil person or a woman or a Muslim person just because of their ethnic or religious identity or their gender identity. We want to hire professionals. But we do say that in having that diversity, and we get the talented people, we benefit as an organization. So those are some very simple things that we have done, but making the rest of your organization understand why we are positively discriminating against a certain group is also very critical, I believe.
Yeah, and Audrey, I would add to that to what Shika just said. First of all, this point on hiring for merit is very important. So, because often you do face these arguments. Oh, okay, they were becoming a women's organization. There's no place for men over here anymore. We've got to change our gender to get promoted in this organization. There are all kinds of comments going on, right? And of course, yes, the worst thing is that when you use an affirmative action policy and compromise on merit. So I think for HR and recruitment managers, it's really, really important not to compromise on merit. That is a basic qualification criteria. And it's only when you have two equally qualified candidates, then you would choose the one that your affirmative action policy guides you to, whether that's on gender or disability or whatever your policy framework says. And then the second thing is, really reassuring the traditional majority in the office to that their chances for growth in the organization are not going to be limited, right? So I think just reassuring them, giving them a stake in the change process, having conversations with them, incentivizing them to join the bandwagon of change is very important. Because when we focus only on one, change agenda, forgetting the rest of the pockets of resistance and trying to bring them along, that kind of change is never sustainable. So I think having very good open conversations but if it's on gender, whether it's on transgender issues or women's issues, it's important to bring the men along on that journey with us.
Mario, anything that you would like to add?
That's final.
Okay. Any final comments from the group before we adjourn today?
I would just thank you both for convening this conversation, Audrey and Ajit. It was really enjoyable to discuss these, and I look forward to more such opportunities. Saturday afternoon in Islamabad, you brightened up my day, and really nice to connect with the audience and get their thoughts as well. Thank you.
Yes, I would echo.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Mario. No, just to say thank you. And also, I think somebody asked about tools and frameworks. I think the most important thing is really the political will and the leadership within the organization to really make these changes happen. And you will find the tools, you will find what really works for you. That's the last bit of advice that I would say to people. That's what's worked for us. So thanks, Ajit and Audrey. And I would love to very much participate in developing this agenda for Sri Lanka. So thank you for inviting me.
And let me thank all of you, starting from our friend from Melbourne, Coach Mario, and the Poverty Alleviation Group Head, Ayesha Salmakariappa. Thank you very much. And also Ashika, our Sri Lankan flavor on this webinar. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure organizing and hosting this event with my partner and friend Audrey. This is going to be a series of webinars, because in just one webinar of 1.5 hours, I don't think we can achieve much. So we will have different speakers coming in. This message is for my lovely audience today. Please be with us, because at the end of this series, what we plan to do is to develop these tools and guidelines and frameworks and matrices that can be used as a document that can be downloaded from our site, aspecthr.com, so that you can use it, you can do whatever developments on it, you can, I mean, it's not copyrighted stuff. We will be very willingly sharing it with all the corporates of Sri Lanka. And secondly, Asia Pacific HR Academy will, together with all these speakers and some of the audience members who would willingly come on board for us to develop a policy framework draft for the government. We would be very happy to do that documentation and hand it over to His Excellency the President and also the subject minister at the end of this series of sessions. So thank you so much for setting the foundation today. And our next webinar will be soon after Christmas, with the Christmas cakes in our hand, on 27th December 2020. And until we meet you during that day with another 3 qualified, experienced and passionate people on the subject diversity, equity and inclusion, let me sign off here, and thank you very much for all of your presence today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.